Good day again, and welcome to episode 2 of Building Modular Dreams. If you're joining us for the first time, thanks for tuning in. And if you listened to episode 1, well, thanks for coming back. I'm Andrew Copley, Business Development Partner at AJC Modular. In our last episode, we introduced Season 2, gave you a preview of what's to come, and shared some of our big news about the new display center and our national expansion. Today's topic is one that gets a lot of people excited, and for good reason. We're going to talk about money, specifically how modular homes can make you money.
Yeah, this is where everyone leans in a bit closer. And I'll just say up front, this episode isn't financial advice. We're not financial planners. We're not giving you a guarantee that you'll be a millionaire by the time you finish listening. We're going to share real numbers, real case studies, and our honest experience. But you should always do your own research and talk to professionals.
Absolutely. Now, some of you might be wondering why we're dedicating an entire episode to investment when, we've also got a lot of people who just want a home to live in. The reason is simple. Modular construction has opened up opportunities that didn't exist with traditional building. It's quicker, it's more predictable, and in many cases, it's more affordable. That combination means the returns can be very attractive. But attractive doesn't mean risk-free. So we're going to walk through it step by step, starting with the basics and then getting into more advanced strategies.
And to make it feel real, and because you told us you liked it, we're going to sprinkle this conversation with the odd hesitation and maybe a few ums and ahs, because that's how people actually talk, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're not news anchors reading from a teleprompter. We're two guys having a yarn. So if we stumble over a word here or there, take it as a sign we're thinking on the fly. All right, let's dive in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about why modular homes are compelling for investors. We touched on this last episode, but it bears repeating because it's the foundation of everything else. Traditional construction is slow. It takes, 12 to 18 months on average to build a house? Sometimes longer if you hit weather delays or material shortages. That's a long time to have your money tied up without a return. With modular, the build happens in a factory, away from rain and wind, and it happens simultaneously with site preparation. So instead of waiting 12 months, you might be ready for tenants in 4 to 6 months. That shorter time to market is huge, because it means your money starts working for you sooner.
Yeah, the speed is a game changer. But there's another piece that people don't always appreciate: predictability. When we price a modular home, we lock in the cost before we start building. That's because the labor and materials are controlled in a factory environment. There are no weather delays, no surprises from trades not turning up, no theft from site. You're not at the mercy of daily fluctuations in the price of timber or bricks. And because we know our costs, we can give you a fixed price contract. That makes it a lot easier for you to calculate your return on investment.
Exactly. And when you combine speed and predictability with the fact that modular homes can be built for less than comparable site-built homes, you end up with an investment that yields more. To illustrate that, let's share a quick example. We built a 2-bedroom modular home for an investor last year. The total cost, including the land, site works, services, and the dwelling itself, was about $180,000. That home is now renting for $650 a week. If you do the maths, that's roughly $33,800 a year in gross rental income. On a $180,000 investment, that's a gross yield of about 18.7%. Now, obviously, you have expenses. Rates, insurance, maintenance, and you pay tax on your profit. But even if your net yield drops to 10% or 12%, that's still better than a lot of other investments out there. Try getting that in a term deposit.
You won't. And the key thing here is that because your build time was short, you started earning rent sooner. With a traditional build, you might be paying interest on the construction loan for a year and a half before you see a single cent in rent. With modular, that window is smaller. Now, that's one example. Let me give you another. We had a client, let's call him Gary, who had a decent-sized block in a regional town in Queensland. Instead of building a single large house, he decided to put 4 one-bedroom modular units on that block. The total cost for the 4 units and the site work was about $500,000. Each unit rents for $320 a week. That's $1,280 a week in total, or about $66,500 a year. His gross yield is over 13%. Plus, because the units are separate, he has flexibility. He can rent them long-term, put them on short-term rental platforms, or even sell them individually down the track.
And I want to emphasize something Mark just mentioned: flexibility. Modular homes can be configured in many ways. You can build a single large dwelling, multiple smaller dwellings, or a combination. You can design them for long-term rentals, short-term holiday lets, or even as relocatable assets that you can move to a new site if your circumstances change. This flexibility opens up different investment strategies, which we'll get into. But let's start with the basics: granny flats and secondary dwellings.
In many councils across Australia, you're allowed to build a secondary dwelling or granny flat in your backyard, as long as you meet certain criteria: setbacks, maximum sizes, and in some cases, occupant restrictions. The beauty of a modular granny flat is that it can be installed quickly, with minimal disruption to your existing home. We've built one-bedroom units for as little as $100,000, including services and landscaping. Those units typically rent for between $500 and $700 a week, depending on the location. So you're looking at a payback period of around 3 to 4 years. After that, it's almost pure cash flow.
Let's run through a hypothetical example to make it concrete. Suppose you own a house on a 600 square metre block in Brisbane. You have a big backyard that mostly sits empty. You decide to put in a 50 square metre one-bedroom modular home. The total cost is $110,000. You rent it out for $550 a week. That's $28,600 a year. After deducting rates, insurance and maintenance, let's call it $3,000. You're netting around $25,600 a year. In just over 4 years, you've covered your initial investment. Everything after that is profit. And because it's on your property, you can keep an eye on it. You also have options. If your kids move back home and need space, you can let them live there. Or if you decide to sell your property, the granny flat can increase the sale price significantly because it's an income-generating asset.
And let's not forget about retirees. We have a lot of older clients who have paid off their mortgage and are living on a pension or superannuation. They're looking for ways to supplement their income without selling their family home. Building a modular granny flat in the backyard is a great option. They can rent it out and use the income for travel, hobbies, or helping their grandkids with school fees. Some retirees even downsize into the modular unit themselves and rent out the main house. That frees up capital and reduces maintenance. The point is, there are many ways to structure it.
Now let's talk about holiday rentals. Short-term accommodation has exploded in popularity thanks to platforms like Airbnb and Stays. People are looking for unique experiences: tiny houses in the countryside, cabins by the lake, pods in wine regions. Modular homes lend themselves perfectly to this because they can be placed on a rural block or even a semi-rural block close to tourist attractions. They're quick to set up, and you can choose a design that fits the landscape. We've had clients invest in small parcels of land in tourist regions, build 2 or 3 modular cabins, and rent them out at premium nightly rates. Let me share a story.
Yeah, tell the story about Sarah and the winery.
Okay, so Sarah is a school teacher from Melbourne who loves the Yarra Valley. She and her partner bought a 2-acre block near a winery. They put 3 small modular cabins on it. Each cabin cost about $120,000 fully installed. They furnished them beautifully. Think cozy beds, a deck overlooking the vines, a little kitchenette, all the things you'd want for a weekend away. They rent each cabin for $250 to $300 a night. They're about 80% booked from September to May and about 50% booked in winter. Conservatively, they're making around $60,000 per cabin per year. Their expenses are higher because they have to clean the cabins, pay for utilities, and manage bookings. Let's say they spend $20,000 per cabin on those costs. That still leaves $40,000 per cabin in net income. They will recoup their initial investment in 3 to 4 years. And because the cabins are modular, if they decide to sell the property, they can either include the cabins or move them to another site.
That's the beauty of flexibility. And I want to stress, you don't have to own a winery or a huge property to do this. We've seen similar success on coastal blocks, near national parks, even on hobby farms. The key is choosing a location with consistent demand. People want to escape the city, have a weekend away, or experience something unique. Modular cabins are a low-risk way to tap into that market.
One word of caution though, local regulations. Some councils have restrictions on short-term rentals or require permits. Others might limit how many dwellings you can put on a block. Always check the rules before you invest. And be respectful of neighbors. Nobody likes a party house next door.
Let's talk about scaling. Once you build one modular investment successfully, you have a template you can replicate. We have clients who started with a granny flat, saw how well it performed, and then built a second unit on another property. Before they knew it, they had 3 or 4 modular homes generating income. There's a couple in northern New South Wales who built a 2-bedroom unit in their backyard. It rented so well that they used the cash flow to fund a second unit on their holiday property at the coast. Then they refinanced both properties, pulled out some equity, and built 2 more units on a larger block in Queensland. Within 5 years, they had a portfolio of 5 modular homes, each generating between $500 and $700 a week. Their total passive income is now north of $150,000 a year. They did the work up front, finding sites, dealing with councils, but once the system was in place, it was rinse and repeat.
And there's another angle to scaling, co-living or micro-communities. In some regional towns with a shortage of rentals, developers are buying large blocks and putting multiple modular dwellings around a shared green space or communal facilities. Each dwelling is self-contained, but the residents share gardens, laundry facilities, or community gardens. It's affordable, it's quick to build, and it fills a need in the market. Investors can own an entire community or just 1 or 2 dwellings within it. The returns can be very attractive because the demand for affordable rentals is so high.
I'm going to throw in an R here because I need to think. We should also mention build to rent. It's becoming a buzzword in property circles. Essentially, instead of building houses to sell, you build them specifically to rent out. Modular lends itself to that because you can produce multiple units quickly and to a consistent standard. Some of our clients are working with institutional investors to deliver dozens of modular homes in a single development. They sign long-term leases with government agencies or corporates who need staff housing. The investor gets a guaranteed rental income, and the tenant gets a brand new home that meets all the latest standards. That's more advanced, but it's a space that's growing fast.
All right, let's talk about money, how you finance these projects. Because you can't build anything if you don't have funding. There are a few different approaches. The most straightforward is using cash or equity. If you've got equity in your home, you can draw against it to fund a modular build. For example, if your home is worth $800,000 and you owe $400,000, you might be able to access up to 80% of the value, meaning you could borrow another $240,000. That's enough to build a granny flat or even 2 small units. The advantage of using equity is that you usually get a lower interest rate than a standalone construction loan.
The second option is a construction loan. Not all banks understand modular construction, so you need to shop around or work with a broker who does. Some lenders see modular homes as less risky because the build time is shorter and the cost is fixed. Others lump it in with transportable homes and treat it like a caravan, which means higher rates and shorter terms. We're seeing more mainstream banks getting on board, but you still need to educate them. A good tip is to have your builder provide detailed documentation, plans, timelines, contracts, so the bank understands what they're funding.
So there's also the option of using a self-managed super fund, SMSF, to invest in property. Under Australian law, your SMSF can buy real property, including modular homes. There are strict rules. The property has to be solely for investment, you can't live in it, and your SMSF must have a formal investment strategy. But for people with substantial super balances, It can be a way to diversify and generate higher returns. Talk to a financial advisor before going down this path because the penalties for getting it wrong are severe.
And don't forget joint ventures. We've seen friends or family members pool resources to buy land and build modular homes. Maybe one person has the land, another has cash, and a third has the ability to get finance. They form a company or trust, each puts in their share, and they split the profits. Joint ventures can be a great way to get into the market if you don't have enough capital on your own. But they're also risky because you're mixing money with relationships. Always have a clear legal agreement in place.
We can't stress this enough. Due diligence is everything. The numbers we've thrown around sound impressive, but they only work if you do the groundwork. First, check the zoning and council regulations. Not every block is suitable for a secondary dwelling. Some councils have minimum lot sizes, maximum dwelling sizes, or restrictions on who can live there. In New South Wales, you often need a full development application, and that can take months. In Victoria, you can often get a building permit without a planning permit, which is faster. South Australia is similar. Queensland is relatively straightforward. The point is, the process varies from state to state, so don't assume what works in one place will work in another.
Second, know your site. We talked about this last time, but it's worth repeating. Soil conditions, slope, access, all of these things can affect your costs. I had a client who bought a cheap block only to discover that the soil required deep footings and extra engineering. It added $30,000 to the build cost. That's not catastrophic, but it eats into your yield. Similarly, if your site has poor access, you might need a crane to lift the modules into place. That's another $10,000 or more. The more you know up front, the fewer surprises you'll have later.
Third, research the rental market. Don't just assume you'll get $650 a week because someone else did. Look at comparable rentals in your area. Talk to property managers. Check vacancy rates. In a booming market, you might be able to charge premium rents. In a soft market, you might need to lower your expectations. It's also important to have a buffer. What if it takes a month to find a tenant? What if you have to drop the rent by $50 a week to attract someone? Build those scenarios into your plan so you're not caught off guard.
And, fourth, finance. Make sure you have pre-approval before you start. It sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people sign a build contract and then discover their bank won't fund the project. Get your finances sorted early. Have contingency. If you think the build will cost $200,000, make sure you have access to $220,000. Stuff happens. Better to have a buffer and not need it than the other way around.
Welcome back to the second half of episode 2. In the first half, we talked about why modular homes make sense as investments. We explored granny flats and holiday rentals. We touched on scaling and financing, and we hammered home the importance of due diligence. In this half, we're going to go deeper with some real stories, people who've done it, what they learned, and what they might do differently. We've changed names and some details to protect privacy, but the numbers are real.
All right, first story. We're going to call this one the backyard miracle. A couple, let's say Jack and Emily, live in the western suburbs of Sydney. They have a standard suburban block, maybe 550 square meters, and a 3-bedroom house. They're both teachers, mid-30s, 2 kids. They're comfortable, but, like many families, they're feeling the squeeze with rising interest rates and the cost of living. They start looking at ways to generate extra income. Jack's sister had put a granny flat in her yard and was making good money. So they reach out to us.
Their biggest challenge was council approval. In New South Wales, as we've said, you often need a development application for a second dwelling, and that can take 6 to 9 months. They were nervous about the cost and the bureaucracy. We connected them with a good town planner who specialises in modular homes. He prepared the application, liaised with the council, and got the approval in 5 months. In the meantime, Jack and Emily arranged their finance, using equity in their home, and lined up tenants through a property manager. When the approval came through, the build took 12 weeks.
Total cost was about $120,000. It's a one-bedroom unit with a decent kitchen, laundry, and a private courtyard. Because of the location close to schools and public transport, it rents for $580 a week. After expenses, Jack and Emily are netting about $26,000 a year. That goes straight towards their mortgage repayments, knocking years off the life of their loan. The lesson here is persistence. The approval was a headache, but once it was sorted, the rest was straightforward.
And they also learned about tenant selection. Their first tenant was, let's just say, not ideal. A few late payments, a party or two that upset the neighbors. Jack and Emily were ready to pull the plug. Their property manager stepped in, gave proper notices, and found a new tenant, a nurse who needed a place close to the hospital. She's been there for 18 months now with no issues. So don't underestimate the value of a good property manager.
Second story. This one's about an investor we'll call Ravi. He lives in Melbourne and works in IT. He wanted to diversify his investments beyond shares and wanted something that would generate cash flow. Ravi bought a 1,000 square metre block in a regional town in Victoria that was close to a new infrastructure project, a highway upgrade and a wind farm. He built 3 two-bedroom modular homes. Each cost around $160,000 including services. He financed the builds with a combination of his savings and a construction loan.
Ravi's strategy was to rent 2 of the homes long-term and list one on Airbnb to capture short-term renters, construction workers, tourists, people visiting family. The long-term rentals bring in $550 a week each, and the short-term rental averages out at about $900 a week. His gross income is around $140,000 a year. Expenses, including property management, cleaning and insurance, bring that down to around $110,000. His debt repayments are about $60,000 a year. So he's left with $50,000 in net income. Not bad for a property that cost him just under $500,000.
Ravi's biggest challenge? Managing the short-term rental. He thought he could do it himself at first. Take the photos, handle the bookings, organize cleaning. After 3 months, he realized it was a lot of work. He hired a local Airbnb management company. And yes, they take a cut, but his occupancy and reviews improved dramatically because the property was professionally managed. The lesson is, know your limits. Passive income isn't always passive. Pay professionals where it makes sense so you can focus on growing your portfolio or, having a life.
Third story. Let's talk about Lisa and John from episode 1's example and expand on their journey. They live in a regional town, their kids have left home, and they wanted to create some retirement income. They built a 2-bedroom modular home on their 5-acre property for about $200,000. That home is rented to a local nurse for $700 a week. So far, it's textbook. But here's what's interesting. After seeing how well the unit performed, they decided to build a second one. They funded it with a loan secured against the rental income from the first unit. The bank was happy because they had a proven record. The second unit cost slightly more, prices had gone up, but by the time it was finished, rents had increased too. It's now getting $750 a week. Lisa and John are clearing roughly $70,000 a year from the 2 units. They've created a mini retirement income stream without having to sell their farm or move away from family.
And what I love about that story is that it shows how modular can be incremental. You don't have to build a village on day one. Build one, see how it goes, then build another. It's manageable, it's scalable. And because you're working with the same builder, the same council, and the same lenders, the second and third projects are usually smoother.
Let's take a step back and talk about diversification, not just in terms of how many modular homes you have, but the types of tenants and uses you consider. Investors often think residential rent and stop there. But modular buildings can serve multiple purposes. For example, a modular granny flat can double as a home office, a studio, or even a boutique workspace for a small business. We have a client in South Australia who installed a 70 square metre module behind his house. During the week, his daughter uses it as a hair salon. On weekends, it converts into a short-term rental. They simply fold away the salon equipment, roll out of bed, and list it online. It stays booked most weekends, which more than covers their mortgage, and the hair salon brings in additional income during the week.
That's a perfect example of mixed use. And there's also mixed tenure. You might have one unit on long-term lease for stability, another on a 6-month lease for flexibility, and a third as a holiday rental for high returns during peak seasons. Spreading your risk like that means you're not dependent on one tenant or one market segment. If tourism slumps, your long-term tenant keeps the cash flowing. If a long-term tenant moves out unexpectedly, your holiday unit can bridge the gap. It's like having a balanced investment portfolio, but within the modular realm.
And to make this work, you need to design with flexibility in mind. Think about soundproofing if you're mixing commercial and residential. Think about separate access if one unit will have clients visiting. And be realistic about your time and management skills. Running a salon plus a holiday rental plus a long-term rental isn't for everyone. But for some, it can be a great way to maximize returns on a single property.
When people start talking about returns, they often focus on the gross yield. We mentioned yields of 10%, 12%, even 18% earlier. Those are eye-catching numbers, but you need to drill down to the net cash flow. Cash flow is what's left in your pocket after you pay all your expenses. Mortgage interest, rates, insurance, maintenance management fees, and any utilities you cover. Let's say your gross rent is $700 a week. That's $36,400 a year. If your expenses come to $12,000, your net income is $24,400. That's your true return. It's still excellent, but it's not the headline number.
And don't forget taxes. In Australia, rental income is taxable. However, there are also deductions you can claim. Depreciation is a big one. The Australian Tax Office allows you to depreciate the building over 40 years. On a $150,000 dwelling, that's about $3,750 a year you can deduct. You can also depreciate some of the fixtures and fittings over shorter periods. Then there are expenses like interest on your loan, property management fees, insurance, and repairs. These deductions reduce your taxable income and can make a positive cash flow property even more attractive.
There's also the concept of negative gearing, where your expenses exceed your rental income, creating a tax loss that you can offset against other income. That might not be the goal with modular, because the yields are usually high enough that you're positively geared. But it's worth knowing that if you have a year with high maintenance costs or a vacancy, the tax system can soften the blow. As always, speak to an accountant because everyone's situation is different.
One more thought on cash flow: plan for vacancy and maintenance. Even if your market is strong, assume your property will be empty for a few weeks a year. Budget 5% of your rental income for maintenance. Things like repainting, replacing appliances, servicing the air conditioning. These are real costs. They won't kill your return, but you need to allow for them so you're not shocked when the fridge dies.
Investing isn't just about the next 5 years, it's about the next 20. That means thinking about how your modular home will perform over the long term. One aspect is sustainability. Energy efficiency isn't just a buzzword, it's increasingly a requirement. New homes need to meet energy efficiency ratings, and tenants are becoming more energy conscious. Modular homes can be designed to optimize solar orientation, cross-ventilation, and insulation. We use high-quality windows and insulation to keep heating and cooling costs down. That makes your home more attractive to renters and reduces their bills, which can justify a higher rent.
And while we don't install solar panels or home batteries ourselves, as we said last episode, we do design our roofs and electrical systems to accommodate them. That way, if you or a future owner decides to add solar down the track, it's simple. Similarly, we can provide provisions for electric vehicle charging, smart home wiring, or grey-water systems. We don't supply the tech, but we make sure the home is ready for it. That's what we mean by future-proofing. It protects your asset's value and keeps it adaptable as technology evolves.
Climate resilience is another consideration. Australia is a land of extremes: floods, bushfires, cyclones. Building codes are tightening, and insurance companies are pricing risk into premiums. When you design a modular home, Think about fire-resistant cladding, elevated footings in flood zones, and secure tie-down systems in cyclone-prone areas. It might cost a bit more upfront, but it reduces risk, ensures compliance, and keeps your insurance premiums reasonable. That's money in your pocket over the long term.
Let's end our diversification discussion with a fun story. A few years ago, we worked with a couple, let's call them Tom and Hannah, who bought a 20-acre bush block in Tasmania. No power, no water, no neighbours. They wanted to build an off-grid retreat they could rent out to city folks craving solitude. We designed a compact one-bedroom module with a large deck, big windows looking out over the forest, and a cosy wood-burning stove. Tom and Hannah organised solar panels, a battery bank, and a rainwater tank through a local renewable energy specialist. The entire project cost about $140,000, including the off-grid systems.
The cabin rents for $220 a night. It's booked solid 3 months in advance. Guests love the experience. No mobile reception, no TV, just nature. Tom and Hannah have a local cleaner who comes in once a week, and they use a management company to handle bookings. After paying the cleaner, the management company, and a bit of firewood, they're netting around $45,000 a year. That's a 32% yield. Now, it's not for everyone. You're dealing with remote access, wild weather, and the occasional possum in the roof. But for Tom and Hannah, it's a passion project that also happens to be profitable. And because the cabin is modular, if they ever decide to sell the block, they can move the cabin to a new site or sell it separately.
Stories like that highlight the versatility of modular. It's not just about suburban backyards. It's about creativity and seeing opportunities where others might not. Now, we wouldn't be doing our job if we only shared success stories. Let's talk about mistakes. We've made plenty, and we've seen clients make them too. One common mistake is underestimating site costs. We said it earlier, but it's worth repeating. Not all sites are created equal. I'll share a personal story. Years ago, before I was with AJC, I bought a block thinking it was a bargain. It was cheap because it had rock just below the surface. So I thought, no worries, we'll just jackhammer through it. It ended up costing me $40,000 in additional earthworks. That wiped out my buffer and some of my profit. If I'd done proper geotechnical testing up front, I'd have known. The lesson? Spend a little money on due diligence to save a lot later.
Another mistake is overcapitalizing on finishes. We've had clients who insisted on marble benchtops, imported Italian tiles, and bespoke cabinetry in a rental unit. It looked amazing, but the tenants didn't pay extra for it. Worse, when something chipped or broke, it was expensive to fix. I'm not saying go cheap, quality matters, but know your market. If you're renting to nurses and teachers, they need durable, easy-to-clean surfaces, not a chef's kitchen. Invest where it matters. Insulation, windows, durable flooring, and stay sensible on the bling.
Financing is another trap. We've seen people sign build contracts without finance approved. Then the bank says no, or only lends 70% instead of 80%. Suddenly they're scrambling to find the extra money. Always get pre-approval. And have a plan B. Do you have a line of credit? Can you delay the start? Can a family member lend you money temporarily? Ask those questions before you sign anything.
Tenants and management, don't underestimate this either. A cheap property manager can cost you more than a good one because they might not vet tenants properly, they might miss inspections, or they might not chase arrears. A good property manager will pay for themselves by keeping your property tenanted and in good condition. If you're going the short-term rental route, consider using a professional management company. They'll handle bookings, pricing, cleaning, and guest communication. Yes, they charge a fee, but they also optimize your occupancy and rates.
We've covered a lot of ground today, so let's summarize the big takeaways. 1. Modular homes can generate strong returns because they're cheaper to build and faster to deliver. The lower your entry cost, the higher your yield. 2. Granny flats and secondary dwellings are a great entry point. They can pay themselves off in 3 to 5 years and then provide ongoing cash flow. 3. Holiday rentals offer high nightly rates but require more management. Location is everything, and local regulations matter. 4. Scaling is possible. Once you've done one modular project, you can replicate the model. Consider build-to-rent or micro-communities for larger portfolios. 5. Financing options include using home equity, construction loans, SMSFs, and joint ventures. Shop around for lenders who understand modular. 6. Due diligence is critical. Check zoning, site conditions, rental demand, and finance before you commit. 7. Mistakes happen. Don't overcapitalize on finishes, don't underestimate site costs, and don't cut corners on property management.
And, let's not forget one more thing. Patience. Modular is fast, yes, but building wealth takes time. Don't expect to retire after your first project. Use it as a building block. Learn from each build, and remember to enjoy the process. There's something very satisfying about seeing a piece of vacant land turned into a home that's providing shelter and income.
Couldn't agree more, and as always, we're here to help. If you've got questions about anything we've discussed, numbers, regulations, strategies, reach out. Visit our display centre in Canberra to see the modular homes in person. You can walk through our Burleigh, Waratah, and Barossa models, test out the VR station, and sit down in the design studio to play with finishes. Our Queensland display centre is now open, with the Airlie and Coogee model on display, fully staged, and ready for you to walk through to experience the AJC quality, and by the end of the year, we'll have another 3 models there too. So if you're listening from Queensland, keep an eye out for that. And yes, we're coming to Victoria, Western Australia, South Australia, Tasmania, and the NT in the next 12 months. We'll keep you updated each episode.
In episode 3, we're going to switch gears and talk about downsizing. How retirees and empty nesters can use modular homes to free up capital and simplify their lives. It's not all about money. Sometimes it's about lifestyle. We've got some great stories lined up, and we'll dive into design features that make modular homes perfect for aging in place. And yes, we'll sprinkle in a few ums and ahs to keep it real.
That's right. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Leave us a review if you're enjoying the show. It helps others find us. And as always, check out our website or visit us in person for more information. Until next time, keep dreaming big and building smart. And one last thing before we go. If you've enjoyed hearing these stories, share this episode with someone who might find it useful. Maybe a friend who's been talking about investing, or a family member thinking about a granny flat. The more people we get thinking about smart housing solutions, the better for everyone.